หนังสือชื่อ Reimagining Japan: The Quest for a Future That Works เป็นหนังสือที่บริษัท McKinsey ได้เชิญผู้คนจากหลากหลายสาขาจำนวน 80 คนทั่วโลกมาแบ่งปันมุมมองความคิดต่อประเทศญี่ปุ่นว่าอะไรคือความท้าทายและโอกาสของญี่ปุ่นที่จะกลับขึ้นมาผงาดอีกครั้งหลังจากที่อ่อนแรงลงจากการเผชิญภัยพิบัติแผ่นดินไหวคลื่นสึนามิและวิกฤตนิวเคลียร์ที่ผ่านมาเฮียงชอซึ่งเคยประจำอยู่ที่ญี่ปุ่นเป็นเวลา 5 ปีระหว่างปี 2006 ถึง 2011 นับเป็นหนึ่งในแกนหลักของการทำหนังสือเล่มนี้
Now let's talk about the book Reimagining Japan. How did this book come about?
We wanted the rest of the world to better understand Japan. We then asked a number of business and non-business leaders to collaborate into a book. The theme of the book is, as is stated in the title, Reimagining Japan. There has been a lot of Japan bashing in the past 2 decades, and we talk a lot about the lost decades or the lost 2 decades for Japan. I believe that there's a lot that Japan can do for its own economy and for the rest of the world. For example, from the technology standpoint, there's still a lot of areas that Japan can provide positively to the world in energy efficiency, in robotics, still in some of the hardware, electronics, in the automotive sector. There's a lot of areas where if Japanese companies are more comfortable globalizing, they can not only expand their business but create jobs in other countries. So the idea was to shape a new perspective on Japan, not just talk about the negative part of Japan, stagnant economy, aging population, a quite close country, but talk about the other part of Japan, a source of innovation, a great culture, rich traditions, gastronomy, Japanese food. So we wanted to paint a picture of what Japan could do in order to regrow its economy again and make the world benefit from its assets.
It's a pretty thick book with many contributors writing in as well. Is there any specific conclusion about Japan to be made?
The big conclusion is that Japan should continue to open up to the rest of the world. Innovation in the next decades in Japan will also come from its interactions with the rest of the world, meaning people coming from outside of Japan, working in Japan, and bring new ideas, new ways of thinking to Japanese companies and Japanese organizations. It is also about Japanese young generation globalizing themselves, going outside of Japan. It is quite amazing to see the reduction in the number of Japanese people going to MBAs in the US, for example. It's just one small indicator, but it's quite worrisome to see that not many young Japanese are willing to go outside of Japan and try to embrace an international experience and career path. So Japanese young people have to experience much more the international world. It is also about Japanese companies globalizing themselves much more. It is quite surprising to see that 30 years ago, Sony and other Japanese electronics companies were very much ahead of their competition, be it US companies or Korean companies. And now they are lagging behind in smartphones, in internet-based businesses and services, in e-commerce. But I do believe that the know-how, the technology are there. So if Japanese companies can look at the global market as their game field, they would benefit much more from those opportunities than just operating inside of Japan.
Have technology or innovation and creativity actually died in Japan somehow? We don't hear any big gadgets or some inventions coming out of Japan in recent years.
It is true that iPhone was invented in the US, and then some other very advanced technology-based products are not invented in Japan. However, as many people know, Japan is still making some of the critical components for Apple products because it can provide a very high level of quality. Japanese people indeed are very much more focused on the engineering side of the innovation process and less on the consumer-driven side. R&D is more important than understanding consumer, if I want to just make a very simple statement. Understanding consumers, anticipating latent needs, trying to make products that are not only extremely useful, working extremely well, but also fun, cool. Those are things that Japanese companies, in particular in the electronic sector, should think much harder about. And that is again related to the profiles of people that work in Japanese companies. And that's where I believe that if some Japanese big companies could inject into their organization talent from outside, from Thailand, from Indonesia, from Europe, from America, and make them cross-fertilize their ideas with Japanese employees, I'm absolutely sure that Japan can come back again as one of the best innovators in the few decades to come.
How should we all, on the individual level, prepare for all of these rapid changes going on around the world?
You need to be aware of what's going on. You know, what is the impact of the Ukraine problem on my company's position in Southeast Asia? And maybe the impact is via, for example, oil price or commodity price or currency effect. All this knowledge is a lot to absorb for business leaders, so it's more difficult. Continue to learn is one important thing. Continue to interact with the outside world, outside of your organization, in your country, but also outside of your country. The world, as we all know, has become a world of network. We can communicate much more easily to many more people in today's world than 5 years ago and 10 years ago. And that network, beyond the chat, in some way should help people to access more opportunities, business-wise, but also from the personal point of view, learning more things, getting into more interesting things, is something that is a great source of inspiration and ideas that we did not have 5 years ago, or even maybe 3 years ago. So these kind of things should be much better exploited by every one of us.
เศรษฐกิจโลกมีการเปลี่ยนแปลงที่รวดเร็วและต่อเนื่องนะคะหวังว่ามุมมองของคุณเฮียงชอจะสามารถทำให้ท่านผู้ชมนั้นเอาไปประกอบในการตัดสินใจเพื่อที่จะเตรียมรับมือกับความเปลี่ยนแปลงและหาโอกาสใหม่ๆให้กับธุรกิจของท่านหรือว่าเพิ่มศักยภาพให้กับตัวเองนะคะและสำหรับรายการมองเรามองโลกเริ่มตั้งแต่สัปดาห์หน้าเราจะมาเจอกันทุกวันเสาร์ 19:30 แทนนะคะวันเสาร์ 19:30 ค่ะพบกันใหม่สัปดาห์หน้านะคะที่นี่ Nation TV สวัสดีค่ะ